summer of chess comes to an end as 20 international grandmasters compete in St. Louis. USChessChamps.com presents the third annual Fall Chess Classic.
Hello and welcome back to our live coverage of the 2019 Fall Chess Classic. My name is Denby and I'm joined for the last time today by Grandmaster Patrick Wolff.
Hi.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here again, Patrick.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
There's a lot going on today.
There is.
We had some surprise shakeups after our show ended yesterday. We expected Vasif Durabaili to at least draw his game to maintain his lead in the A group, but actually he ended up losing that position, and now we have an astounding situation in Group A. And so why don't we actually take a look at that situation with the Group A standings. And there we see, so with Vasif's round 4 loss, we actually have 4 players tied for the lead in Group A, with 4 more chasing just a half point behind. Clearly, this tournament is anybody's chance. Daro also lost his game yesterday, with Var and Ray both winning to move into this leadership position. Definitely crazy tournament standing here, with 8 out of 10 players really on the button for winning this tournament. And why don't we actually take a look at Group B standings as well. Jack Shtembuliak only managed a draw yesterday in a very interesting game against Manuel Petrosian, I believe. And Yasser Quesada Perez actually managed to win once again, bringing him to 3.5 out of 4. So now Jack has been caught, and it'll be interesting to see what he does today to try and take this clear first position back, or maybe Yasser will be the one to jump into first place. And why don't we head on over and see the tournament format for this event. It's a pretty interesting one. It's quite similar to the World Cup, actually. There are 2 10-player round robins, which isn't similar to the World Cup, but the time control is exactly the same. It's 90 minutes for the first 40 moves, with 30 minutes added on for the remainder of the game after move 40, and there is a 30-second increment starting from move 1. There's also a draw rule in effect, where the players are not allowed to offer a draw to each other until Black has made his 30th move. As always, thank you guys for joining us here on YouTube. Just search St. Louis Chess Club on YouTube, Fall Chess Classic, and you'll find us here. We're keeping an eye on the chat. If you guys have any questions for us, questions for the players, once we get them in for an interview, we'd love to hear them. We'd love to respond to you guys. You can also get involved on Twitter using the hashtag #FallChessClassic. And if you want to see the games for yourself, follow along, look at any game you want. You can do so from USChessChamps.com. Well, with that in mind, what do you think about the games today, Patrick? What's going on?
Well, there's some very interesting games, and one actually that's over already that we should take a look at, because that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But there's one game I'd love to jump into right away in the B group, actually.
Yeah, so why don't we take a look at the B group pairings and see where we stand there. So Victor Mikhalevski is paired against Hambleton. Aram Akobian has drawn his game already against Manuel Petrosian. Yasser Quesada Perez is paired against Iveta Grigorian. Denis Kadric is paired against Alexander Fear. And then this key matchup of the day, I think, is the one you want to take a look at. Jack Shtembuliak, who is leading the B group with Yasser Quesada Perez, is paired against Steven Zierk. And the game is in a very critical position right now.
Yes.
So without further ado, let's take a look at what's going on.
Yeah, let's jump into the analysis of this. So if you take a minute to absorb the board, you can see already it's a little bit of a crazy game. Both kings look exposed, but actually Black's king is paradoxically much more exposed than White's. Black is almost, but not quite, at this point on the verge of being checkmated, but he's got everything sort of controlled. And of course, right here, we have the bishop attacking the queen here. And so the question is, where should Black move the queen? And it's a trick question, because the answer is he shouldn't. He actually should play this pretty incredible move, rook here to d3.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to explain why in a moment. First, let's take a look at why should Black not move the queen. Let's suppose, for example, Black moves the queen to f4.
Yeah, very natural.
Very natural move, right? But in this case, White actually wins immediately by playing queen takes knight, pawn takes, rook g7, king h8, and now just rook g4, and you snag the queen.
Yeah, king is very much stuck on this h-file.
So, okay, maybe black should move the queen somewhere else. So what if black moves the queen,
Yeah,
let's say
queen c2 maybe.
queen c2. Also a natural looking move.
Yeah, I'm just trying to hide from that rook.
Yeah, exactly. But it turns out actually that after white plays this move, rook g5, the threat of just breaking through here on h5 just is overwhelming, and there's basically nothing that black can do about it. You can sort of like try to wriggle around a bit, but
and rook d1 check, white can simply take and play
White-
bishop e1.
yes, correct.
Of course, it'd be a mistake to play king g2.
Yes, because then that would
I
actually,
guess no. Yeah, king g2 would be fine as well.
Well,
There's
king
the
g2.
pin on the knight.
Well, just very quickly to show here, takes. You don't play king g2 not because of knight f4 because that knight's pinned, but because of queen takes pawn.
Yeah, defending the knight as well.
But you just play bishop e1, and it's basically over. Rook takes knight is going to be lights out. So the correct move, it turns out, in this position is for black to play this pretty extraordinary looking move, and we have to wonder whether Steven Zierk is going to find this move.
Yeah, it's a very difficult move to have to play.
It's a very difficult move. Now,
I still don't fully see the idea if white simply captures the rook.
well, how do you capture the rook?
With the pawn.
So if you capture with the pawn, now you get to capture this bishop.
Okay.
And now, actually, it's a very unclear position, in fact, because black has some compensation for the exchange, and now, without that bishop, the attack's kind of slowed down to a crawl. There really isn't any way to break through here.
Right. And it seems like that the e-pawn was pretty critical for defending the white king as well. And
Yeah.
now that it's on d3, there are a bit more problems. Okay.
So, in fact, the better move is to play queen takes d3.
Of course.
And now pawn takes, bishop takes, pawn takes knight, and pawn takes pawn. And okay, white has an extra exchange. It's better position for white, but it's not over yet. It's better position for white to be sure. But we have to wonder whether, in fact, he's going to find the one move to keep the game going, or instead whether it's going to be lights out very soon. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
If I was calculating rook d3 from afar, that final position looks very, very scary to me. I would think like rook g5 for white there might almost win the game. Just my king is stuck on the h file still, and with the two rooks, I don't know. If that's the best that black can do, I think black is in some serious trouble. So I'm sorry, queen takes d3 instead.
Yeah, no, it's not clear, because if white plays rook g5, then queen takes d3 check.
So
Well,
I'm
excuse me,
confused.
queen takes rook, obviously.
So queen takes
Excuse
d3 rather than pawn takes d3, I think.
me. Sorry, what?
We were looking at queen takes d3 instead of pawn takes d3.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand what you were
So
suggesting
yeah,
here.
just the line that we went down.
Here.
So yeah, pawn
Here.
takes, bishop takes, pawn takes f5.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're playing. So pawn takes e2, king takes
Pawn
e2
takes
as well.
f5. Yeah.
And then I was looking at
Rook g5.
rook g5 here. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's for sure. It's a better position for white.
Well, I was just thinking like king g2, rook h1. I can declare checkmate almost.
Well, I mean, we can. we can keep going down this rabbit
Yeah.
hole if you'd like. I mean, I'd like you to trust me for now that
Sure.
it's a better position for white without question, but it's not over yet.
Okay.
Whereas, if he doesn't find rook d3, it's over. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. By the way, a side note here is that this game is pretty crazy. I'm backing up a bit, and in fact, here in this position, and you may be asking, how did we get to this position? Well, it was a crazy game. But white actually did not find the right move here. Queen h3, which he played, is a good move, but turns out, in fact, that there was even a stronger move simply by taking on g7 right away. So a lot of fireworks. We've gotten to this position here. And now black has to try to find the one move to hang on for a bit longer, or see whether the game's going to be over very quickly.
Yeah. Rook d3. Is there any way that white can go wrong?
Well, the key,
I
of
guess,
course,
I mean,
is just to
yeah,
just
white's
play
going to
queen
take the rook. Yeah. But yeah, very interesting position.
All right.
And
So
how much time does Steven have? It looks like he still has quite a bit of time to try to figure this one out. So I'm sure he'll be in the think tank for a long time here.
yeah,
Working on this very complicated position.
yep.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see that king on e1 with 3 pawns in front of it. Like
Yeah. Now,
like
another game that might be worth taking a look at is actually one that's over. But it was quite an exciting game where Jordan just ripped through his opponent.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can see the final position here. If we sort of count the pieces, you'll see that White has 2 extra bishops, so obviously Black was right to resign. But maybe we could take a quick look
Yeah,
at
there's
this.
a very, very fun tactic that
Yep.
you would manage to play in this game.
Yep. So let's just click through this game quickly. You'll see it's an Alekine's defense. White gets a pleasant position. Nothing terribly exciting, but just sort of a space advantage and a little bit nicer game for White, a little bit freer game. Game develops pretty naturally for a while. Nothing much happening here, and then in a move or two, we're going to see this move by Black. So back here, I'd say this is a very normal looking position. A little better for White. I'd certainly rather have White than Black, but playable for both sides.
Absolutely.
But here Black played this tactic, or this move, based on a tactic that I think was just a mistake. So White took on h6, and Black took on h3. So the idea being that pawn takes bishop actually turns out to be very bad, because queen takes pawn. And now you can't play bishop takes bishop, because you just go queen g4 check followed by knight f4.
Yeah. Pretty interesting sacrifice by Black.
Yeah,
But,
so you can see this obviously would be pretty bad.
yeah, the knight's hanging, checkmate is threatened. It's tough to save everything for White.
So going back to bishop takes h3, but White simply played knight e5, and once you take a look at this position with the exchange of the pair of h-pawns, it turns out that White is the one that's benefited enormously from this, because with the extra space, Black's king is much more exposed. It's much more easy to take advantage of Black's more exposed king than White's king.
Especially with this dark squared bishop getting traded.
Yep. So we'll see Black did in fact take the knight. White took back. Black brought the bishop back. Already the computer is literally giving White the advantage of 4 pawns. I mean, it's that bad of a position. We'll play a few more moves through the game.
And then here, perhaps.
Not quite
oh,
yet.
Not quite.
Not quite yet. We're coming up to this
I'm
tactic.
so excited. I'm so excited.
So White pushes the knight away, plays the pawn to c4. Black moves the knight to b4. It turns out actually the strongest move here is probably just to move this rook to h4 right away. This actually probably wins immediately. But instead, White plays rook e3, also an extremely good move.
Bringing in the last piece.
Yep.
Well, not the last piece, but more pieces.
And really this position is basically lost for Black. But Black, in trying to find some defense, played his knight to d7, which allowed White immediately to take the bishop on f5, which is this very nice tactic you're talking about. So now, if Black takes the queen, it's simply over after rook g3 check. You move the king either h7 or h8, rook h4, and basically it's going to be checkmate very soon.
The very classic checkmate with the 2 rooks.
So instead, after queen takes f5, Black had nothing better than to play queen takes. And after queen takes, knight takes, rook takes, well, this is the final position. White's up 2 bishops and Black resigned.
Right. Well, that was actually an interesting game in the A group, so why don't we take a look at the rest of the pairings in the A group, and then a quick look at our key matchup eventually. In the A group, Smirin is paired against Var Akobian, who is leading the tournament with +1 along with 3 other players. Vasif Durabali, another one of those players, tied for first place, is up against Alex Ipatov. And now Jordan van Foreest, after defeating Alexander Bortnyk, also moves to +1. So like I said, it's anybody's game in the A group here. Daro Swiertz is paired against Hrant Melkumian. And then our key matchup of the day is between 2 players that are at +1, Alexander Lenderman and Ray Robson. They took kind of different paths to get here. Alex has been playing very solid chess. He's had an advantage in almost all of his games, I think, but was only able to convert in one of those positions. Meanwhile, Ray has had a bit of an up and down tournament. He had a very quick draw in round 1, actually lost in round 2, but he came back strong with 2 wins on the previous 2 rounds. And what kind of position do these 2 players have right now?
Well, as you pointed out, Lenderman's been playing very solidly, and we have a very solid-looking position on the board. So I would say, you know, Garry Kasparov used to talk about a symbolic advantage. So the idea of a symbolic advantage is it looks like it's better, but really when you look at it, it isn't anything.
Right.
And I would say that's what this position is. So certainly white does have the better pawn structure because black does have this isolated pawn on d5. And white has very good control of the blockading d4 square. Black's in no position to push the pawn right now. Yes, nominally white has an advantage. But black has perfectly active pieces. And there's only one weakness, only this d5 pawn. I would say really there's no advantage whatsoever, and the computer agrees. And not only does the computer think this position is equal, the computer is actually completely agnostic as to whether black should push the pawn to g5 or instead push the pawn to h5. And when you see these positions where now it's sort of bouncing around, maybe it thinks like black should move its king to h7. I don't really understand what the idea of that move would be, but the basic idea is that black can kind of pass in this position, and it's still equal.
It's another one of those situations where something that strikes me is, white's king. There's always going to be pressure down this c file, and you can kind of imagine maybe some major pieces get traded off along that file, because if white were to abandon it, then there's always threats of rooks coming into c2, and there's no really good way.
Or c3, actually.
Yeah, or
with,
c3
with
as well,
square
eyeing
here.
those weak pawns on b3 and e3.
Yeah.
So tough for white to really do much without risking something in return.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, of course, the game is going on. It could change. We'll see what happens. But I would place a reasonably high probability of a draw in this position. Although plenty of pieces still on the board. And Ray does only have about 13 and a half minutes at this point for the next 10 moves. So whereas Alexander has almost half an hour. So we'll have to see what happens.
Right. Well, I guess we can go to whichever game you want now. If I had the choice, I think Var Akobian's position is looking quite interesting. It seems like Ilias Smirin is actually running into some difficulties this tournament. If anybody I think has been the target in the A group so far, I think it's actually been him. Despite, obviously he's a chess legend, he's challenged some of the best players in the world and done quite well. But in this tournament, things not quite going according to plan.
Yeah, I think offered the choice between white or black, I would take black in this position. The computer agrees, thinks black has sort of a reasonable advantage, half a pawn or so. The computer's completely agnostic at this point as to whether white should move the rook here to e1 or instead whether white should move the knight to c1, presumably with the idea of bouncing quickly to d3. But I mean, if it were my choice, certainly I'd be more inclined to look at this move knight c1, just because I sort of understand what the idea is.
Yeah.
But black has more space. Black has active pieces. Obviously, this long diagonal here.
Yeah,
although
some nagging pressure along
definitely
that
some
diagonal.
nagging pressure. Now, of course, the queen and bishop are sort of not quite lined up the way you'd want them to take advantage of that diagonal. And right now, white can defend by pushing the rook to f2 and control this critical square g2.
Yeah, if only queens could jump over pieces.
Yeah, well, that would be different. So certainly white's okay here.
Something I'd be afraid
but it's an
of.
advantage. It's an advantage for black.
Obviously, this will take a few moves, but as black, my problem piece, I seem to have two. My bishop on b6, it's serving a purpose. It's defending my pawn, but especially my knight on e7 is not really pulling its weight.
True.
So I'd love to play knight to c8, bring it into d6, and then all of a sudden, I'm looking at very nice squares, like the e4 square.
Yep.
And so...
totally agree with that. And in fact, in all lines, this is the computer's next couple of moves for black, literally just to reposition the knight from e7 to c8 to d6, which not only activates the knight, but also uncovers the rook along this file. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
it's an easier position for black to play.
Yeah, slight edge, but very natural moves to follow.
Yep.
So, maybe white has some natural moves as well. Of course, he can improve his knight in much the same manner. But I think with easy moves to follow, it's going to end up being difficult for white in this game.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is an interesting situation where, okay, so he has played the knight to c1, which, as we were saying, did seem like the most logical move. And we'll have to see. At this moment, the computer is actually agnostic between moving the knight to c8 or moving the bishop to e4, also a perfectly reasonable centralizing move. I think probably the more human move is to move the knight to c8, just because it's a very easy move to play, and it keeps a lot of options open.
Right.
We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, bishop e4 might be anticipating the white knight landing on e5 or something and just removing the bishop from any situation where it could be captured.
Sure. Well, I think it just sort of centralizes the bishop
It controls more squares.
and just sort of increases black's general control over the board. But I think what we have here is definitely a position that's more favorable for Akobian. Ilya's under pressure here, and it's going to be interesting to see whether he's able to find a defensive plan or if he's just going to have to keep holding against difficult pressure.
Before we jump off this game, there's actually a question from the YouTube chat. It seems as though VAR took over 20 minutes for his move knight g5 early on in the opening.
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on why that might be? I'm actually not familiar with the position where he played knight g5.
Yep. Well, let's bounce very quickly to that. So, sorry if I'm going a little bit quickly. This is a Tarrasch French. White played knight gf3 and then c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c6, and eventually white traded the knight on c6, so that's how we get this position.
Perhaps they meant to say knight g6. I think
probably knight
g6,
yeah. I can't say why he took so long to decide on this move. It's a perfectly reasonable move, obviously, making way for the bishop to develop. I'm not familiar with the latest theory in this position, but just from my basic knowledge of having played these setups with white before, I would say, frankly, it really isn't much of anything for white.
Yeah.
And I think black actually has pretty easy play.
To explain why maybe black took so long, there's always this moment out of the opening, for me at least, where it's like, okay, I know now the character of the position, I know what kind of line my opponent has chosen, and you take a minute to refamiliarize yourself with the ideas, take a look at what white's plans are, and then decide on the best course of action. There's always this moment where you kind of settle down, get into the real pace of the game, stop playing just your theory immediately. Yep. And probably that's what was going on here.
So since we're in this, we'll just sort of very quickly cycle through the moves to get to where we are right now in the game. White played bishop e3 in this position to develop and allow himself and block this bishop's diagonal here. And so both sides castled. Black played c5, taking space in center. White played c4, which stops the black pawn from advancing, but at the same time allows black this protected passed pawn here on d4. f5, very, very logical move, taking more space, stopping white from ever pushing the f-pawn himself. We can basically almost see the shape of the position on the board from this. And so, obviously you can tell, at some point white exchanged pawns on f5, i.e. right now, and then just some piece exchanges and remaneuverings, and here we are.
All right, very interesting position. Well, I'll let you decide now. What looks interesting to you?
Let's see. Sorry, I've been so wrapped up in these last couple games.
Yeah, there's
we've been
a lot to
looking
talk
at.
about today. I do want to mention, actually, Steven Zierk has decided on his moves, and it looks as though he has decided on rook to d3.
Yeah, let's bounce back there. So we actually now have a position very similar to the one we were considering just a few minutes ago. So we'll go back to the critical moment. Here we go.
Yeah, so they followed that exact computer line, actually.
Yeah. So black puts the rook on d3, white takes with the queen, queens come off, pawn takes knight, rook g5, knight g7. Pawn takes pawn is an interesting decision here. White could have decided instead to move the bishop to c3, which the computer recommends and also looks very logical to me and seemed like, but at any rate, he decided instead just to take the pawn. And this allows black to move the knight around. So on the one hand, white's captured this pawn before black's able to take it with check, but on the other hand, white's a little bit slower to bring the bishop around.
So yeah, Steven's chosen this setup to solve his problems.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was my question earlier. Is it seems as though the black king is going to be weak, but with this second knight on e6, it really controls a lot of the important squares.
Yeah. So it's interesting. The computer. So let's sort of give the computer a few seconds to sort of come up to speed and decide what it thinks. But
sure.
Basically, white is better to be sure, but this is by no means an over and done game. The best move, according to the computer, and certainly a move that makes a lot of sense to me, is to play knight h5. And now the point is, if you move your rook to h3, actually, it's not that scary because you can defend this knight. White can't bring the king up either to e2 or g2, because in either case, this knight would come here, fork the king and the rook. And so,
you kind of see both the strength and the weakness of the bishop here. The bishop is very nice on c3, controlling all of these dark squares, but black has simply put all of his pieces on the light squares to try to defend his king.
Yes, and also there's nothing that this bishop is coordinating with right now. I mean, it would like to coordinate with the rook, but the rook can't come to this g3 square because the knight here obviously controls it. And white can't bring the king up to either one of these squares, as we talked about a moment before. So this rook here on a1 is a little bit out of the game. Meanwhile, this black rook, pretty active. So in fact, it's a very unclear position here.
It seems like white has left himself with actually a difficult technical task, whereas earlier on in the game, perhaps he was just winning.
Yeah, and in fact, knight h5 has been played. Now, the computer thinks, and I certainly agree, that rather than moving the rook to h, moving the rook to e3 is a better move. There's no point to rook h3 because king g6 defends everything, so might as well put the rook in a more active square.
Well, while this game is still going on, someone in the YouTube chat is interested in the Alexander Ipatov game, which is something that interests me as well. It looks like Vasif Durabaili, things are starting to go quite wrong for him. He was off to an early lead in the tournament, but with that loss yesterday and now looking like a very, very tough position today, things are turning around.
Yeah, no, he's really completely lost control of what had been a perfectly fine position. So
how did we get here, first of all?
Yeah, let's cycle through the game quickly so we can see. So it's a very funny opening, actually.
1b6.
Yeah. So a little bit of a latency issue with the computer, so I'm going to cycle through as quickly as it will allow me. So white has, I mean, this e5 move, by the way, is an interesting choice.
What's your opinion of openings like 1b6? How should white try to play in order to take advantage of it? Do you just play natural moves, get yourself a solid center, and develop your pieces, or do you go for?
I think there's nothing wrong with white's setup here. I'm a little less sure about developing the bishop out to g5 as soon as he did. But
my main question is, like, you see this move e5 happen quite early. So in my opinion, white has gone for something where he's trying to immediately punish black. He's saying, you can't play this slowly with b6. I'm going to open it up right away. Whereas I feel like in other situations, another player might just castle his king, bring the rooks to the center, play it a bit more slowly. And I was wondering what your opinion of that was.
I think it really depends on your style.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your style and it depends on how well prepared you are. I would tend not to initiate fireworks so quickly unless I had a lot of confidence that it was the right thing to do if I'd prepared it ahead of time. But at any rate, it's not that it didn't work out. It just didn't really get much for white. I mean, we can see as we sort of cycle through these moves, this looks a little bit like a Pirch defense for black, where he's managed to free himself pretty well, actually. And as we just keep sort of cycling through the early opening moves, we can see that,
already
nothing special.
Already this pawn on e5 is...
Well, I don't think the pawn on e5 is a weakness. I think it's perfectly well defended.
Okay.
I just think that there's really nothing special here for white. I mean, black's developed all of his pieces.
It's not so much a weakness, but my point was going to be it's kind of stunting white's own bishop on g3.
Yeah.
The bishop that e5 square might be better used for a knight or a bishop rather than this pawn.
So in this position here, black made a very interesting choice to take the pawn on a4. Very dynamic choice, very imbalancing things. But even though it's a very dynamic choice in terms of sort of stylistically what it does, in terms of the actual evaluation of the position, it doesn't really change that much. Basically still an equal position. But what happened, it is very imbalancing, again, stylistically, because you do have this bishop that one day could become very powerful if white doesn't sort of maintain control. And that's basically what happens. So white has this extra pawn, but on the other hand, black has the two bishops, this very powerful light square bishop, probably a fairly dynamically equal position. And as we just sort of keep going here, what we'll see is black managed to keep improving his position reasonably well, and white made a bit of an error by putting this knight on d4.
Yeah. Leaving all of his pieces hanging somehow, but.
Well, the problem is after this pawn to g4. So we've now caught up to where we are in the game.
Right.
If I'll just briefly show the people watching. White played this knight on b3 to d4. Whoops, sorry about that. I've got this, it's updating automatically, so I'm going to click back, apologize. After knight bd4, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, black pushed the pawn to g4, and now the problem is this knight really doesn't have a good place to go, because if you try to move this knight, black is going to take the knight on d4, and you have this pin here against the rook against the pawn on c3 against the rook on c1. So I'm not really sure what white was thinking here.
So yeah, but knight f5, black can simply capture this knight on f3.
Yes, so that's exactly right.
Awesome.
Pawn takes knight is.
I thought I understood tactics.
Yes, no. Pawn takes knight is actually going to win material, and frankly, it looks to me like it's going to win the game pretty quickly. So
yeah, of course.
I'm not really sure what Alexander was thinking, but looks like he just blundered there.
Yeah, maybe we should show the line. Of course, there is this knight takes e7 move to worry about, but at the end of the day, the rook on e2 is also hanging for
Correct.
white, and that's the main problem.
That's correct. So this is exactly right. Yes, white can take on c8, but black can take on e2. And after knight takes rook, pawn takes rook, a quick count shows that black does have an extra piece. And oh, by the way, also this pawn on e2 is a monster.
Yes, it's a big by the way.
Yeah, so not looking good.
All right, so that's huge news for the A group. Just after our show yesterday, I expected, Derbyli to draw his game, maintain the clear first position, and then go into today feeling good. But maybe that loss has shaken him a little bit.
Yeah,
this is not the chess that we've seen from him in the first half, or the first couple rounds of this tournament.
Yeah, so we'll see that in fact white did move the rook to e3, which is a sensible move, but white is at this point just a piece down. So I think we have to expect that black's going to win.
Yeah, should be very good. Okay, so
let's see.
What else is happening?
I think we have covered the most exciting games.
Right.
But we should cover a few of the other games too, just so people can see what's happening. Maybe round out the A group?
Yeah. I think the only game that we haven't talked about in the A group is this game between Daros Swiers and Hrant Akobian, which has actually ended in a draw.
Yeah, so I guess not much happening there.
Yeah.
But we can briefly show, I think, what happened in the opening if people are interested in seeing. It was a Scotch opening, and again, apologize for the latency here, but this is a well-known variation of the Scotch. This move h4 is sort of a modern treatment of it. It used to be you play c4 right away, but at any rate, what happened is after this f6 move, pawn takes, knight takes, the queens came off fairly soon. It took another few moves, but the queens did come off, and with the rooks having come off as well, you can see that there really wasn't a whole lot to play for. There's still some imbalance in the position, but nobody did anything wrong.
Right.
And just not really any advantage for either side. So the fact that it petered out to a draw, not too surprising. We'll just sort of click through so people can see the final moves here. But it just ended up being a repetition.
We see the repetition there.
And it's all gone.
So yeah, interesting stuff for the A group.
Now let's bouncing down into the B group.
Yeah.
Let's cover maybe the slightly more interesting game, that is the game that has not been agreed drawn, and that is Yasser Quesada.
Yeah, of course, Yasser Quesada Perez, one of the leaders in the B group coming into today.
Yep.
He's competing with Jack Shtembuliak, who, like we said, has a tough technical task against Steven Zierk to try to make a full point. So what has Yasser done in his quest to score the win here?
Well, I mean, just taking in the position before we go over any variations, a couple things are sort of impress themselves. One is White's pieces, White's rooks in particular, certainly look much more active than Black's rooks. So rooks like open files. White's rooks have this open file here, and of course the rook has this open file here. So White's two rooks are sort of operating on open channels. There's also this square here and this pawn here, which of course is well defended now, but still is a target. On the other hand, Black's rooks are just sort of sitting on, they're just sort of blocked up. Obviously this rook on d7 not doing anything right now, but more to the point, this E file, this F file, they're both sort of hitting on granite here. And yes, you could try to push this pawn on d5 to try to loosen things up a little
Yeah,
bit.
it seems like that's Black's main source of counterplay here.
But that would leave the c5 pawn more exposed. So,
right.
So from a pieces perspective, White's rook's more active than Black's. White's knight on e4, very well placed. Now it is true that Black has the two bishops, and in the long run, the two bishops could very easily prove to be an important factor. Right now, not doing so much.
Right.
So I would say that White is slightly to be preferred here. However, there really isn't. It's not very clear what White is going to do. So if you're looking for weaknesses, we did talk about that pawn on b7. Yes, but it is well defended by the bishop. There is this pawn on d6. Yes, but it is very well defended by the other bishop.
Right.
I think a draw probably the most likely outcome here, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I would prefer White for the moment.
Yeah,
but
totally agree with you. If I had to
you could
choose,
imagine,
I would take White.
You know, given a couple moves, Black might play something like Rook c7 and then Bishop d7 if you give him the chance.
Yep.
And once this bishop moves from c8 to c6, Black's pieces make a much less bad impression.
That's true, although even with the bishop on c6, it's still not clear exactly how you're going to activate that much. At some point, Black's going to have to try to put. I mean, you're right. The plan is at some point to push the pawn to d5 when this pawn on c5 is not a liability, but can be used more dynamically.
Right.
I think if White is alert, that probably should not be allowed. I think White is probably for choice here, but very unclear whether either side can make any progress.
Fair enough. So that's how the two leaders in the A group, or the B group rather, are doing today.
Yep.
How about some other people who are chasing those leaders? What's going on with Denis Kadric against Alexander Fear? It looks like they are in a rook endgame.
Yes.
Which evaluation is unknown to me.
Well, obviously White is the one who's trying to win.
Right.
If I had to guess, I'd probably say equal chances whether it's a win or a draw. But I'd be quite nervous if I was Black here.
Yeah, the
Black's
main
done a good
thing-
job activating his rook. That's good. But you can easily see how White could divert Black away to try to block this, to stop this b pawn, which would then allow the White king to come in this way and target this weak e6 pawn.
That's what I was going to say. The Black king seems kind of torn. It needs to stop the b pawn, but it absolutely cannot let White capture on e6. Because if e6 and f5 fall, then the two connected passers on the king's side are going to win the game.
Yep.
So if I were inclined to guess, I think this looks very promising for White.
Yep,
But,
totally agree. Totally agree. And the computer, by the way, thinks that White is 2 pawns ahead. So certainly the computer thinks White has a very large advantage. I agree. Actually, the more I look at this, I have to say maybe it's better than even chances that White wins this position. This looks very difficult for Black indeed.
All right. So that would bring Denis up to 3 points out of 5. Which would still be a fair margin behind these two leaders. They've kind of pulled away from the pack, so to speak, but definitely making progress, chipping away at that lead if the two leaders don't manage to win today. Then I think there's one more game we haven't looked at, if you're interested, and that is the game between Amon Hambleton and Viktor Mikhalevski.
Hang on just a sec. Here we go. Yes. Yes, you're quite right. And this is, you know, it's interesting. This game has been sort of fairly equal for a while, but in a very interesting way.
Yeah, definitely dynamically equal.
Very dynamically equal, and with both sides, the clock ticking down, you could imagine either, as they say, sort of all 3 results are possible here.
Right.
So I will tell you, I'll just sort of play out what the computer thinks is the best line. The computer does not like taking the rook as much as playing bishop to e6. And then after king h8, just knight g2. Which I agree, makes sense.
Is the idea to actually capture this rook on f4?
The idea is...
I feel like that's what Black wants, is
yes,
please take my rook.
Yes, maybe to capture the rook
Okay.
on f4, I think is sort of the way to say it. Just sort of...
Threatening. You're threatening.
Threatening maybe to capture the rook. It's a very peculiar position because certainly you can see all kinds of ways it could become very dynamically sort of further imbalanced. But right now, it kind of looks like neither side can quite break through. But boy, this is a nail biter, I'd have to say. And with so little time left, someone could make a critical decision at some point that could really change the evaluation of this game.
Right. My feeling is, say we make some nothing move for black, and then white takes on f4. Like like if black passes here, just bishop a8 or something.
Well, let's play bishop d6 for example.
If I play knight takes f4,
Yep.
You're taking with the g pawn, I assumed.
You know, not at all clear.
Okay.
Both moves make sense, and in this position, actually, the computer prefers taking with the e pawn.
Yeah, because
in order to use that e5 square.
I wanted to point out a problem with taking with the g pawn, which seems like the most natural to me. If you do take with the g pawn, I wanted to play bishop h4, and really, I don't think g5 is a move black wants to play, because once my bishop can get to this f5 square, if a rook lands on h3, you have some very, very serious problems with your king.
You know, I'm afraid I have to disagree there, because after pushing the pawn to g5, and then you just move the bishop to f2, and knight f6. Actually, I don't think that white really has any attack going at all. And meanwhile, I think that black could easily take things over by eventually pushing this, bringing this bishop back to c8 and getting rid of the this bishop on e6.
Right. I guess it's all just a bit too slow for me. If this knight on f6 covers, of course, the h7 square, which is the one thing I was looking at, and I guess that would not be the way to do it with white.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll have to see what happens. I think we should definitely check back into this game in a few minutes, because with the clock ticking down, with 10 moves to go to the time control, and with such a complicated position, something could easily happen.
Yeah, very difficult position. So I think that is all of the games for the moment. So where do you want to check back in on?
Well, let's take a look back at the Smirin Akobian game.
Right.
It looks like Akobian is just sort of making steady kind of progress here. He's sort of repositioned his pieces, but I think Smirin's done a good job at holding this. It doesn't look to me like either side has much of an advantage. So we'll click back a few moves just so people can see. In fact, after white played this move, knight to c1, black did in fact decide, rather than playing knight c8, d6, to play bishop e4. I don't know whether that's the right move, but that was the decision he took. Smirin understandably moved the knight to d3.
So he chose this other path for the knight.
He chose this other path for the knight, which personally I don't like as much, but obviously Akobian is thinking very hard and probably seeing much more than we are, so he's only looking at his own game, presumably. So white played this a2, a3 move with the idea perhaps of pushing the pawn to b4, so black locked that down. White moves the rook to e1, black moves the bishop back, but actually the computer is not so impressed at this point anymore, and thinks basically, in fact, if anything, maybe white is slightly better, or maybe it's just an equal position. And Akobian only has, if I'm understanding this correctly, he only has 2 minutes 45 seconds. Is that right?
Maybe we can get a close up of the actual board there.
Yeah.
The board camera to
Let's
see
take
what the true standings are. So yeah, he's down to 2.5 minutes to 13 minutes and 20 seconds.
That's really quite extraordinary, because this is an incredibly difficult position to play when you're low on the clock, because it's just not at all clear what you should be doing.
Yeah.
So I would actually say here, if I had to bet, maybe the position objectively is equal, but I would be betting that Smirin has very good chances to win, just because Akobian needs to play some moves, and good moves, fast.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Let's take a minute and just see what happens here.
Yeah, I have to wonder, what was Var's idea with putting this knight on c6? The only purpose I really see it serving is it does control this e5 square.
Yeah.
So now the white knight, at least, cannot land on that square quite so easily. But from d6, it controls the e4 square. It eyes this weakness on c4, and I thought that knight would have been much better placed there.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to ask him afterwards if he's in the mood to talk, because the clock is ticking. I mean, just by way of context, he's lost almost half his time at this point without playing a move. And I could tell you from experience, at this point, he's not necessarily coming up with better ideas by sitting and thinking. It's a very, very difficult type of position to play when it's just not at all clear what he should be doing.
Yeah, obviously all players handle time pressure differently, but I feel like for a lot, the way it goes is you start thinking about how low on time you are, and you spend less time even thinking about the position.
He looks to me like he's melting down, actually. He is down to, can we take a look at that clock?
Yeah,
he is literally down below a minute. That's extraordinary. I think we are literally watching his game tick away because he needs to come up with an idea.
Yeah, you have to play something here.
And the thing is that if he plays a move, like he'll have to play another move and another. It's not a position that plays itself. It's a position where you have to sort of like decide what you want to do.
You see him glance at the clock there.
Yeah.
Glance at his notation sheet. Trying to
goodness,
figure out. Oh
really
my God!
painful.
I have to make so many moves.
This is really painful. This just looks to me like he's slipping.
Just play something, VAR. Play something. Goodness, 20 seconds. Wow, just watching that timer tick down, it's very anxiety-inducing.
Okay, so Queen D7's been played.
It seems like a perfectly reasonable move.
Yeah.
A move that you could play after 5 seconds.
Yes, I agree with that.
Much less, not 4 minutes.
I totally agree with that. He did not have to take so long here.
And now we'll see if Ilya chooses to respond rather quickly, keeping the pressure on, or if he thinks this is where he needs to spend his time. Just off hands, there are a few moves that I think White could play quite quickly.
Yeah, but
right?
so it should be said, since we might as well turn our attention back to the actual
right.
board,
Talk
the
about
actual
the chess a
analysis.
little bit.
The computer does not like Queen D7, and thinks that White actually has a solid advantage after just a very simple, straightforward move, which is Knight F2. Yeah. And the idea here is we're going to lead to the exchange of bishops. We're going to trade rooks. All very simple, straightforward moves, but now look what's happened. Now suddenly we have this very bad bishop on A7, and White's pieces are quite well placed. And Black's knight on C6, it looks active, but actually you can see it's not really doing anything because all these squares are either blocked or controlled by the opponent. So not lost by any stretch, but an unpleasant position.
Knight F2 has actually been played now as well.
Okay.
And we see, the players go down for this line pretty quickly.
Yep.
So while that is a good position for White, it's an interesting practical decision that White has made, because Black's position does not look great there, but it is a little bit simpler than this position that he had previously.
Can we zoom in on that clock and see where are we now on the time?
Yeah, so with that 30-second increment, he's back above a minute, and
that's
these next
right. That's
couple
a good
moves,
point. At this point, the 30-second increment matters enormously, doesn't it?
Yes, very, very relevant.
That's
here.
really something.
So yeah, that's
He's
what I was
literally
saying.
doubled the amount of time he has.
Maybe Ilya had even better chances if he found some way to keep it a bit more complex than this. Because now
Yeah.
VAR gets to play 3 or 4 easy moves, get that time bank building up just a little bit, and then before it's back to the serious pressure.
Yeah, I will say though, on the other hand, this is a very pleasant position for White. I mean,
it's tough to disagree with good chess moves.
Yeah, I mean, this is a win or a draw, right? I mean, that's basically what we're looking at.
Right.
And I could easily imagine either result. It's very hard to imagine White losing this position. Of course, it could happen. You could make a mistake and so forth. But with normal moves here, this is either a win or a draw.
Yeah, and not to drive this point into the ground, but you can really imagine if this knight were on d6 in this position, it's a whole different story.
Yes, I agree. If Black had maneuvered the knight from E to C8, D6, and E4, very different dynamics here. The knight is really badly placed on the C6 square. I agree with that.
Well, maybe good chances for Ilya then, which is not something we expected just a few short minutes ago. So perhaps today is a day for the players on the bottom of the leaderboard of the A group. Alex Ipatov, of course, with that B6 position where he is still, I think, just up a clean piece.
He is. He is up a clean piece.
Game.
We can click there very quickly, but
Ilya looking really to press in this position as well.
Yes, in the end game we were just looking at, and now we've gone back to the Ipatov game just momentarily, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't know why they're still playing.
Yeah,
because this is quite over. But wow, yeah.
All right, so it'll be interesting to see how this game shakes out.
Let's go to the back to the Shtembuliak game. It's really gotten very, very exciting. So let's go back a few moves so we can sort of catch up to what happened here. It's really pretty interesting. So
Black maneuvering these knights around a little bit.
yeah. So remember, we left off in this position. I'm not sure what this knight move does. It sort of looks active, but actually, if anything, I prefer the knight on e6 rather than f4.
Right, and especially with this knight on h5. You know, that knight, if it's going anywhere, it probably wanted to go to this f4 square.
Yeah. So if we just click ahead a couple more moves here, we'll see.
So we rerouted to the very nice
rerouted,
d5
and
square.
now Black decided to make a very fundamental change in the position and push the pawn to c5.
Interesting.
Very understandable, of course, on doubling the pawns, and yet, and trading pawns too, which might help, and yet making White's rooks more active, because before, with this more compact pawn structure here, really, you know, with these pawns here, it's very difficult for White's rooks to really sort of break through anywhere.
And yeah, I did want to mention just quickly, Alexander Ipatov has in fact won his game against Vasif Darabayli. I believe Whitehead resigned in that position.
Yeah.
So as expected
To be expected. So now, after the exchange of pawns, it sort of looks like Black is getting more active, but I would say, if anything, it looks to me like White is becoming more active. You see, the interesting thing here is the pawn itself is kind of less important than whether White's rooks get let out of their box and start roaming the board. And it looks like what's about to happen is this bishop can move to c3, and this rook can move to b1, and then all of a sudden this rook becomes active. And meanwhile, these knights here, as you pointed out, this knight on h5 in particular, quite passive. You know, Boris Spassky once said many years ago that this particular knight formation, when you have sort of one knight stuck defending another, is a particularly dangerous one. It can look active, but actually turn out to be sort of passive and brittle.
Yeah, these knights defend each other, but they also kind of get locked into place.
They get kind of, exactly, they're sort of locked into place. And that's kind of what's happened here. So, and I should say the computer thinks that White is up a pawn in this position in terms of the magnitude of his advantage. And that was better than he was doing before.
I did want to mention, I do understand where Black's coming from with this, though. Honestly, one of the best ways to try to draw these games, I think, is to just start counting the pawns. All right, 3 pawns to go. If I take off this d pawn, 2 pawns to go.
Yep.
If he runs out of pawns, I'm not going to lose this game.
Yep.
Which, while that's a very straightforward way to try to draw, like you said, he's giving White some activity, and so
he's giving White some activity. And
I did want to mention some huge things are happening in the Hambleton game against Viktor Mikhalevski. Viktor actually chose to capture on f4, but not with a minor piece. He took with a rook, so not even accepting the exchange. Instead, choosing to capture on f4 as a fair trade.
Oh wow, let's bounce back to this game.
Yeah.
So as we were saying, you know, things could happen, and holy cow, have they ever!
Yeah, this is
and by the way,
insane.
if the computer could puke, it would be doing it right now. It does not like what White just did, and I must admit,
it's very strange.
I'm very puzzled.
If you're going to take on f4, surely you should do it with the knight.
Yeah, but also, why take on f4 at all? It's a very interesting, puzzling choice. So here we are. So apparently he thinks he has an attack. The computer, if the computer could laugh, I think the computer would stop puking and start laughing, actually. Because the computer actually, it's telling that the computer thinks that Black has a completely winning position if he plays either of two totally different moves. So on the one hand, the computer thinks that White is 5 pawns up if he moves the pawn to h5. There's just no attack.
Well, so I'm sorry, you said Black.
Yeah, Black is winning. Black is winning. On the other hand, the computer thinks, excuse me, that Black is 3.5 pawns up if he pushes this pawn to b4. Just completely stopping the queen from coming to the c3
Yeah,
square.
that was, I think, White's main source of counterplay. He wanted to play queen c3 check, force this king onto some bad square, and then checkmate.
Right.
But
so
it looked a bit unrealistic. So.
very, very, very puzzling. I don't understand what he was thinking. We'll have to ask him if he's in the mood to talk.
Yeah,
Which
what is the line after h5 in that position, actually?
Sure.
h5, queen c3 check had to be the idea.
Well, interestingly, the computer doesn't even think it's worth playing the queen c3 check. There's simply no reason to do it. So if you play h5, the computer just wants to move the knight back to f2.
Then you're just...
No, let's force it. So queen c3 check, and obviously black has to move the king. Well, not obviously, I guess, but I guess obviously you don't move the king to f8. That would be a disaster.
Yeah.
Because that would be checkmate.
So I guess the main point of h5 is it gives your king this h7 square,
Correct.
as well as attacking.
Well,
the
it
knight.
also attacks the knight, exactly. So, so now after this king h7, I mean,
there's no way to save both pieces for white, right?
no. So, I mean, we can just sort of, we can sort of pretend that there's an attack and take the knight on d7. So yes, it's true. You don't want to take back because of knight f6 check, but so what? By the way, black can just play queen takes pawn check, which is going to force an exchange and just win everything. But also, by the way, black can also take this knight on g4, which also works just fine. So yeah, that's very puzzling. I don't know what White was thinking.
Yeah, it had to be some mistaken calculation, but...
Now, interestingly, Aman has played a different move altogether. The computer's not happy with this move. Still thinks black has an advantage.
Yeah, in fairness, both players are quite low on time.
Yep.
But I feel like h5 was a very findable move.
Well,
That's
I think
one
h5
that you can
was very
really find.
findable. And to be honest, I think pushing the pawn to b4, to me, was an extremely human move to play. Just really sort of take control of the dark squares, clamp down the attack. It's very interesting. I don't know what's going on here, but at any rate,
does not feel like the best move at all.
So critically here, the computer thinks that white should play queen to c3.
Yeah, I mean, what else? This was white's main point.
Yeah.
Which is why knight f6 strikes me as so strange, is you're forcing your opponent to play the move that he wanted to play.
Yeah. Now, I agree with you, pawn to h5 is a very natural move. It attacks the knight, it gives the king to h7 square. Yeah, very peculiar. Don't know what it was thinking.
Of course, after a move like b4 from black here, there's simply queen e5 from white, and white does have enough squares now to stay on this diagonal.
Does have enough squares. It's still basically a winning position for black, excuse me. But let's just play this line out. So as you point out, white can put the queen on e5. Black can chase the queen. Now, if you play the queen to d4, h5 actually is a good position for black. But, you know, let's just play this out a little bit. You can take.
So takes,
you can
black
take.
takes.
The computer actually wants to move the queen out here to a7, but black moves the queen back to e7. Bishop f2, bishop c8.
You get the feeling he's getting the same positions he would have gotten, except he's not up a piece.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, we could keep playing, but the basic point is black is up a pawn. It's a good pawn. Black's pieces are well placed. It certainly looks like black should win, but it's not over. Whereas before, it could have just been over. And we'll go back. White did play the queen to c3.
It's on the board.
Yep.
Oh, and it looks like we actually have a result here in the Denis Kadric game against Alexander Fear. Those players, let's see if we can pull up that position. Oh, well, yeah, black has resigned.
Yeah,
White
black
has won.
resigned.
As expected then. Wanted to make sure nothing too crazy happened.
So, why don't we bounce to that game just quickly?
Yeah, of course, this was the very, very difficult rook endgame that we were talking about.
That's exactly right. So, so let's see, find a good spot here. Quite a lot of moves happened, so we have to sort of.
Yeah, so we last left off around here. Rook a3, I think, was White's choice. In that position.
Sorry about that. I'm still learning how to use the interface here, so I have to overcome the latency effect here. So what happened was, so here we were, and black faced this fundamental choice, which is do you stop the white king from penetrating over here and then let white get over to the weak e6 pawn, or do you hold the weak e6 pawn and let white penetrate? We can see exactly what choice was made. But what ended up happening was white was able to just push through. I won't go through these endgames can be quite complicated, so I won't try to go through and analyze them in detail. Suffice to say that black did not find the most accurate defense, and then this last move here, actually a bit of a blunder, just allowing white g4, which basically wins right away, forcing this exchange here of the pawns.
Yeah, and so while we wrap up
he
looking at
resigned
this game,
because after king d7, white plays the pawn to b7, and there's nothing to do to stop the pawn from playing.
I did want to mention, we actually, I believe, have a player ready to come in for an interview.
Oh, fantastic.
So while I switch out here, why don't we take a look at one more game and see, I don't know, it looks like some progress is being made
Let's take a look
in
at
between
the
Smirin and Akobian. So
Okay.
we'll actually go wherever you want.
Well,
Sorry.
let's go back to the Hambleton game. We'll go back to the Group A, but this has gotten wildly exciting. Black has actually played an inferior move. So if you remember, we were back here, and we thought that black had. Oops, excuse me for that auto update. We'll come back here. Black actually had two very strong moves. He could play the pawn to b4, or he could move the bishop to b4. He chose instead to move the bishop to d4. It's not as crazy as it may look at first, because in fact there is this pin against the queen, which is where we are now. But now all of a sudden, this position much less clear, because it's really to white's favor to have traded the dark square bishop for the light square bishop, and to have gotten this opposite colored bishop, and well, not endgame, but this opposite colored bishop position after, for example, knight takes f6, queen takes f6, bishop f2. So still black is to be preferred. Very complicated position, much less clear than it had been, much less of an advantage than it had been just a couple moves ago, when in fact black had a completely winning position. Now, much less clear, and of course we have to point out both sides less than a minute and a half on their clock, so who knows what's going to happen as this game unfolds. So, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.
Would you like to drive a bit and show us your game?
Yeah. Okay, can I get the mouse?
Oh, sorry. Well,
Yeah.
sorry. Why don't you click here?
On your computer?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, can I see a little bit?
Yep.
Where's my game, first of all? Can I follow? This one, huh?
Yeah, so we were watching this, and
Oh,
you know,
okay.
for a while it looked like.
Can I flip the board?
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, it's hard to flip the board. Sorry, you're going to have to look at it from your opponent's
I'm
point
not
of view.
used to looking
how,
from other
How
side.
far back do you want to go? Do you want to go back to the beginning, or is there a particular point that you'd like to zero in on?
I don't know. We can go
Well,
from the beginning.
why don't we
and-
start at the beginning? Actually, why don't you explain to us the choice you made with your opening? So 1b6 is not normal.
Well, I'm taking classes, I mean, so I don't have time to prepare. So I just didn't want to. I'm just lazy, and second, since I'm -2, so before the tournament I was happy with 9 draws, but then it seems like people wanted to beat me because I'm rusty, haven't played for 9 months. So at some point I got angry and had to start playing something for a win. I mean,
So you just decided to imbalance things.
I mean, they forced me. I mean, right?
Sure.
So -2 is too much, I think.
Sure. Okay, so so we got to this position, and white made the instant decision to push on e5, push e5 right away. What did you think about that?
I mean, it seems like a principled continuation, but I saw that I have d5, knight c5,
Right.
and my bishop is playing, so it's like very double-edged position. I mean,
Yeah.
so my approach wasn't to play some objectively good position for myself, just to get some imbalanced position and hope to complicate matters. And
Had you analyzed this position
no,
before?
no.
Okay, so
I
you,
didn't. No.
okay, so you're just playing as it comes.
Yeah.
Excellent. So bishop b5 and knight fd7 and b4 and knight e6, and certainly it does seem like you managed to get your pieces to.
Yeah, bishop on g3 is quite bad. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. It seemed like the early development of bishop to g5 may not have been as.
you want to
as
provoke
effective.
h6, right?
Yeah.
And prevent my move e6, knight g7.
Right.
So yeah. And here, I mean, instead of knight c7, maybe I could have done something else. I don't know.
So you were happy to gain some space on the queen side.
I mean, it's also a concession because I give him d4 square. That's why I played knight e6 back, not to allow him knight d4.
Right.
Yeah. So
How did you evaluate this position at this point in your mind?
I don't know. I don't evaluate. I mean, I like.
Were you happy with your position?
Yeah. I mean, it was quite unclear. I mean, what was going on.
Yeah.
So I mean, I leaned towards the practical approach. I mean, I didn't know what was going on, and I'm sure that my opponent also wasn't sure what was going on. So.
Were there any decisions he made that that you did not agree with? For example, this pawn to h5. Did you?
It also seems like a principled continuation. I don't know.
So you felt like maybe he was trying to punish you, sort of like try to get an advantage as much as possible.
I didn't evaluate position that much. I was just playing without thinking too much.
Right. Okay.
And here I thought, I mean, I have to eliminate his light squared bishop. So here
Right.
I think I had to do this. Otherwise, he might create some threats on b1, h7 diagonal.
Right. Okay. So just to explain to the viewers, so your thinking was after White had played this h5, g5, this principal decision to sort of open up this diagonal here, you thought, okay, it's time to exchange the light square bishop off to make sure that it won't ever be a danger, even at the cost of this pawn.
Yeah, I didn't even calculate that much. Visually, it looked good, and usually I just trust my intuition.
There you go.
But when I enter too complicated positions, sometimes my intuition lets me down. Or I get in time trouble, then I mean, okay.
Sure. So again, just sort of to ask, what did you think of your position at this point? Were you happy?
I thought I had good compensation, I thought. And yeah, my opponent wasn't sure about this move. He was suggesting something else. I don't remember.
You don't
instead of queen b6, he suggested queen d7, I think.
Oh, okay. So
which I saw this move as well, but for some reason queen b6, queen b5 looked good. Yeah, queen d7 is what he suggested looks good as well. Yeah.
Right.
And queen a6, and he said something after that. Yeah, queen d7, let's say. Black is even better. I mean, yeah. Queen takes a6, let's say. Bishop f3, he said. Bishop f3, gf3, and knight a4. I saw bishop f3, of course.
Right.
Yeah, so whatever he said seems like a first line, so maybe I misevaluated the position here. I didn't want to trade his dark squared bishop.
Yeah.
I understand the White's king is exposed, but I thought, I mean,
certainly a very, very imbalanced position. White has two connected passed pawns, but on the other hand, the king side's been to shambles.
And his knight is out of play, right?
Knight is out of play. Well, if the queens were off, suddenly the knights would be in play. But yes, knight's out of play when the kings are in danger. Very, very, very imbalanced position. But instead...
Yeah, so my opponent evaluated the position better at this point, yeah.
Queen b6, rook takes, queen b5.
Yeah.
Certainly, as you can see, the engine thinks it's basically an equal position.
Yeah.
So seems like probably you agreed. And then here, White played
he blundered, yeah.
Just a blunder, right? Do you
know
what he was thinking?
Knight f4 he had to play.
Yes,
exactly. He didn't see knight g4. Wait, g4 he didn't see. Knight f4.
He just didn't see g4.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
We all blunder.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So basically, at this point, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, and just didn't see this move g4, pushing the knight away, creating the threat of knight takes knight with this pin of the pawn
black
against
pieces
the
are
rook.
very well developed.
Yeah.
So I can check knight f4 instead.
Sure, absolutely.
I thought I have compensation, but then again, I was lazy to calculate the things. I was just playing based on intuition. Knight f4.
So,
according to my opponent, I mean, I have to be precise here.
So what were you thinking? Were you thinking knight takes knight or queen takes queen?
I saw actually the first line to give up queen for two rooks.
I'm sorry, say again?
Like the first line, knight d4, queen b4. But I don't think I would have gone for it. But I saw this line, knight d4, knight d4, queen b4.
Knight d4,
c4.
knight d4, queen takes b4,
rook
which
c1.
looks pretty extraordinary, but the point is after pawn takes, you're going to get this rook with
king
check.
h2, bishop a2.
And then you take this rook, and now...
If he moves the knight, I have rook dd1 and rook h1 ideas. But again, I didn't like something. Maybe queen b2. That could disturb my coordination or something.
Yep. Queen b2, rook d1.
Yeah. And most likely White will find some perpetual. I mean, so.
Yep. It's interesting how for the computer it's sort of like always equal no matter what, right? We can play different moves. Doesn't really care which way you take the knight.
Yeah. I saw this line, but I'm not sure I would have played it. I mean, actually, I had nothing. I mean, like planned against knight f4. I thought maybe he wouldn't play this move. I mean,
and you're quite right. So you were saying maybe find a perpetual. I think that's exactly what's happened. Is e6, f5, queen a4, and now all of a sudden, this is going to end up being the perpetual check, back and forth. So just to show the viewers, black can play f4. This bishop on g3 is trapped. But white is just going to play check. Black moves the king up, and it is perpetual check. So certainly not saying, and by the way, if black moves the bishop to f8,
Big
that
queen
is a
g6.
terrible mistake because.
Actually, white is winning. Queen f7 check.
Exactly. Yeah. So, of course, none of this is forced, but just to illustrate your point that you just always seem to have enough activity.
Yeah,
for the
that's
pawn.
what I thought, but I didn't see anything concrete.
Yeah. So the key error then
She's losing
was
out.
this knight bd4 move, where just to go back to show the viewers one last time, this knight bd4 a mistake, and instead knight fd4 the correct move, probably holding some sort of equality.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see anything concrete,
Yeah.
but I thought I have enough.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations on a fine win.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ryan Chester, and I'm the development manager for the St. Louis Chess Club. I'm here to tell everyone about a golden opportunity that we have right now. We're selling golden tickets for $50 a piece. It's a 50-50 raffle. $5,000 will go to the Scholastic Chess Initiative for the St. Louis Chess Club, and $5,000 will go to a lucky winner. We're only selling 200 of these, and we've already sold many to grandmasters and all of our commentary team as well. So if you're interested, please call the Chess Club or go to our website on the homepage and buy a golden ticket there. Thank you and good luck.
When you visit St. Louis, you'll probably want to watch the Cardinals or the Blues. What about after the game? Heading back to the hotel would be a major error. Instead, boogie through the city and discover the music that gave the blues their name at the National Blues Museum, Broadway Oyster Bar, or even the legendary Blueberry Hill. So whether you love the Cardinals, the Blues, or the blues, come play with us. Hey, you guys know I can't play this, right? St. Lou is always exploring.
Win earlier, like much easier win.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. So we're joined by Denis Kadric. Thank you very much for being here, and congratulations on your win. So very interesting end game, and also quite a very interesting middle game that we didn't really have much opportunity to go through. Why don't you talk to us about what you think some of the interesting points in the game were?
Well, I mean, interesting. It was, I guess, the opening. Like it looked very, very good for me from the opening. From the start, it looked like white is much better. Later on, I don't know. Like the end game was kind of. I mean, it's not so interesting for, I guess, for the people who were watching. But yeah, like bishop f4. I'm not sure. Like it looked just very nice for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the computer doesn't think anything of it, but.
But it looks. I mean, you just have such a big grip in the position.
Yeah. Rook he1, and now. Okay, I was thinking on rook c8, queen a7. What is he playing?
So on rook c8, queen a7.
He just sacrifices rook c3.
Just wants to sacrifice.
What
Although
rooks?
actually the computer is not clear. In fact, the computer thinks maybe even rook c7, which is quite funny.
Okay.
But all it means is queen b6 and rook takes c3. But let's take a look at rook takes knight just for fun. And now the computer actually does not want to take the rook, wants to take the bishop instead.
Okay, the computer plays bc, bishop a3, and then queen c8.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't even considering, of course, something like that.
Something like this.
But okay, first of all, I thought that I have queen b7 after rook c3, but then I didn't see the queen c8 move. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That after rook c3, queen b7, black has the very good move queen c8. I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
And then I have to exchange queens. Where
Yeah.
white is probably still slightly better, but nothing really.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Well, so we have a lot to get through. So I think what we can say here is Your opponent played bishop e7,
Yes,
and probably rook c8, very dynamic and difficult to evaluate, but looks like it was
I guess, yeah, rook
better,
c8 is really good if it, like,
if the tactics work, it's
Yeah.
the move you want to play.
that's it.
So, but at any rate, he played bishop e7, and then you took advantage of the opportunity to trade the bishop.
I don't understand why the computer doesn't think so much about this position.
Well, no, now
here,
the computer
What
likes.
happens if he castles instead of taking? Because my idea was to play knight e5. Can I? What is that? My move?
Yep.
Knight e5. Yes.
Knight e5.
Yes, and here black cannot move at all. I think.
Yeah, this
Knight
is a
e5.
very, very
I mean,
pleasant
the only
position.
thing that I was calculating here was knight e8 now.
Yep.
Knight e8. I take bishop e7. Queen e7. Queen d7. Queen g5. Check. King b1. Queen e5. Queen b7, and now on knight d6, because the rook is hanging on a8,
Yep.
knight d6, I have queen c7.
Yep.
And rook d8, I think I just win a piece with f4, e5.
Yes.
Is it?
Exactly.
Yeah, queen, if he plays now rook d8, I think it's just going to be f4,
Yeah, the
and then queen
computer won't
f4,
even look-
e5.
The computer won't even look at
Yes,
rook d8
yes,
because
yes. Okay,
but we'll point it out to the viewers that rook d8 will either work, but at any rate f4, queen takes,
And e5, yeah.
and e5,
And you cannot protect.
and you cannot protect. You can play
On,
the knight
on
back
rook
to
c8,
b7.
I can just play rook d6.
Correct. And the final tactic is on this, rook takes knight, and now of course this allows rook takes rook takes.
Yes.
Um,
So he didn't go for the
So we didn't go
castle.
for it, but again, we've got a lot to get through. So
Yeah.
we'll get the bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop. Of course, black has taken an extra move, an extra tempo to trade these bishops, so it's very advantageous for you. And this is just looks like a pleasant advantage, right? You must have been quite
Knight
happy
e4
here.
is a really good move. I'm not letting him play rook c6, and actually my idea is knight f5.
Yeah,
So I think the only move is g6, right? Yeah, because after knight e4, my huge threat is knight f5 that black cannot really do anything except playing g6.
yep, exactly. So so black played g6 to stop that.
And now I go e5 because there's no rook c8 and the knight has to go back. Or actually he jumped on g4, which should be just losing somehow very fast. But I didn't see it.
Yeah, well, I mean we sort of are letting stockfish sort of churn away for a few seconds, but I guess rook d2
Yes,
as
yes.
opposed
Okay,
to
yeah.
f3.
Rook d2 actually makes more sense because then there are no queen g5 checks,
Right.
and there is no knight f5 because knight f5 is always annoying for me.
Right.
Yeah, so rook d2 makes a lot of sense. Rook d2 was the better move for sure.
f3, knight h6, knight e4, but obviously this is a very pleasant position.
I mean,
for
this
white.
should be, yeah.
Yeah.
Rook e4. What did he play now? Knight f5. Yes.
Knight f5, knight takes, pawn takes. So basically, you're just winning a pawn, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's what ended up happening. a5.
And here I was actually considering to play something like not to take the pawn, but to maybe play g4.
Yeah.
I had some ideas to play g4, fg, rook g4.
Yeah, and
But
it's interesting actually. The computer doesn't want to take this pawn. It wants to play some move. You know, it's trying to decide: is it f4? Is it b3? Is it a3? Some move to try to strengthen the
Yes.
position before taking.
I was also thinking the same basically, but then I just took. I was like, okay, let's first
It's a
take.
pawn, right?
Let's
yeah.
first take it.
So take, castles, f4.
Rook c4. I went with the rook back. He played rook c5. Okay, I think these moves are just, they're not really a lot to say because,
Right.
okay, but here he made a huge mistake. Rook d8, okay, he took, h5 was okay. Now probably my move. Okay, I played now rook d6.
Mm-hmm.
My idea is actually, h4 is a good move.
Mm-hmm. You think you were thinking h4 was a mistake?
Yes,
What were you
because
thinking?
I'm getting the pawn for free. Rook d3, rook h3. That was my idea. That's why I just played rook d6, not letting him to play f6 basically, not exchanging pawns. And now I'm gonna, like, if he plays now king g6, let's say, then he threatens h4, then I would play probably h4 on my own. Because then the king is even more far away from getting king f8, king e7. And then like I would try slowly with c4, king c2, rook d3, rook c3, taking the pawns.
Okay.
That was my idea, but actually then h4 should be good. Yes, okay, I mean the computer thinks this is good. Rook c8, I mean he has to go back with the rook h3, and now rook h8.
Yeah, and suddenly
He has
black's
to
in a very
protect the
passive
pawn.
position. Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean the tactic that he actually has that I cannot play g3 because my idea was to play g3. I thought g3 is just winning. But g3 he takes hg, and if I take rook h8, g2.
Yeah, that would have been a bad one to fall
Yeah,
into.
that's so. I was thinking actually instead of c4, what if I play king b2? So rook h8. Can I play now king b2? Yes.
sure, yeah.
And then he has to play rook d8.
Yeah.
Because now I have tactic like king b2,
Yeah.
let's say, and let's say black tries to keep the same thing. He plays rook h6.
Right.
He tries
right,
to keep the
right.
same, but now it doesn't work because rook h6, g3, hg, rook h6, and then g2, rook h3.
Yeah,
And
that's
at
very
the end, I
funny.
just give a check.
Right.
So
And now it's not check anymore, so
Yes.
we can make this a queen.
So I should have
This
tried
is
king
really
b2,
nice.
but I was thinking, okay, c4 should be just winning, but it wasn't. It was actually very difficult position. King c2, yes, f6,
Yep,
good
F6
move.
to free himself.
The thing is, whenever I play g3, he will just go rook d8
Yep.
and then play rook d2.
Rook g8, g3.
Yeah, king e7 was a bad move. I think he should have just went immediately to exchange the pawns. Go for some e5 stuff.
Yeah.
Just to exchange as many pawns as possible. That's what I was thinking, that should be close to maybe a draw. Still, of course, black has very hard time. I mean, he still has to defend, but
needs to activate. And if white plays this
he just
check,
goes back, I guess, huh?
it just,
because now
just
he-
goes back.
Yeah, now he gets on g3 and now he gets very active. And my
Yes.
pawn on e5 will probably just fall at the
As,
end.
as is so often the case in these endgames, the most important thing is to activate the rook. No
Yes,
matter
because
how.
he can also just always play a4. That's the thing. If
Yeah.
I attack the pawn with rook c5, a4, ba, and then it's a very simple draw.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
king.
actually,
That's interesting. So king e7 may have been a critical mistake. The e5 may have been a good try.
yeah,
here.
he should have got like very.
And in fact, if we can just, the computer actually wants to do this. And
Oh, okay, yes, of
And
course, I saw
check.
this. No, I was
Yeah.
thinking that actually like this is winning for white. That's what I was thinking during the game. I'm gonna take on a5 and then I'm gonna play 2 on the flank against this one pawn. But it's not so clear.
it's not clear.
The pawn is very
Pawn's
far.
very active, and
very
you
far,
may
yeah.
you may have to give something in order to
Yes,
stop
yes.
it.
So probably this should be just a draw at the end.
But obviously, a very difficult decision to make
Yeah.
if you're trying to draw. So exactly the kind of thing that might be objectively correct, but practically very hard to take that decision in that moment. And instead, he played a more passive move, which allowed you to consolidate somewhat.
But still, very unclear.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Like here now he played AG. I think is always a mistake because this makes my life much easier.
Right.
When there's a pawn on h4, I always have to think, can he go to the second rank also?
Right,
Right
right.
now, I have
The
no
H-
weaknesses because after AG now,
Yep.
I only have to protect the third rank.
Yeah. In fact, this h2 pawn can sometimes be at least as weak as that.
Yes,
h4
I always have
pawn.
to think about now the second rank also and the third rank because he can always play HG.
Yep.
So I think this move was a mistake from him
Interesting.
because now it makes it much easier for me to defend.
Yeah.
But then he played now rook b5, I think, yes. And now I took a lot of time because now I see his idea is actually to push e5 again.
But this this b4 move looked very nice to me. Oh, sorry, you didn't. You played king c3.
I was thinking about to play b4, but
Uh-huh.
I wasn't sure what after e5.
Ah.
b4, e5, fe, yeah, fe, ab, a4, rook e5. Okay, the computer says that position is winning, but I was like in my head, if he exchanges all
sure.
the pawns, I
Fair.
have the a pawn is not so simple.
No, of course, this is very difficult.
Yeah, so I mean, still his king is totally cut, so should be winning. But
Yeah.
I just wasn't that sure. That's all.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't play it.
No, it's interesting in these end games how sometimes like it requires some transformation like this and
Yes.
to win, and it's always hard to decide whether.
Okay,
it's
so
the
here
right time.
basically I spent like 20 minutes or like half an hour because I was calculating e5 now. I wasn't even thinking about the move that he played. He gave me check, after which I think should be just very simple win for me.
Right. Okay.
This king d4 and b4. But what after e5?
Okay, so you.
I
were
think that was the
thinking-
critical moment, one of the
You were thinking e5.
I was thinking king c4 to play actually, not f. Okay, what
Well, the
f
computer
e5?
likes both king c4 and f takes e5.
Why is fe5 so much winning? fe5, rook e5, what then? It doesn't say rook e5. Rook e5. Okay, he goes for this position. Just to push his pawns.
Well, just because the king is, I mean, if you can,
Yes, yes. Oh, okay, okay. So probably this was a very actually simple win.
Yeah, because in fact, if anything, the addition of these pawns probably helps you, maybe.
Yes, 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 yes.
It's simply because it cuts this rook off.
And the rook cannot, like black cannot even try to
Yeah.
exchange rook d6 or something.
Exactly.
because
Exactly right. Yeah.
there-
Yeah.
there are
But all
two
the pawn
pawns.
endings are
Yes,
lost.
yes, yes.
That's right.
Ah, okay, okay. So this was a very actually simple win. I didn't realize that. I wanted to play something else. I was considering like e5, king c4, now e4.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Okay, so we'll have to go to the critical,
Yeah,
the
sure,
last critical, because we're running short on time.
Sure,
let's
sure.
let's sort of spool ahead. I know the thing about these rook and pawn endgames, they look so dry, but actually they're so
Okay,
fascinating.
now here now I think you just lost because
Yeah.
my position is very, very simple.
Is there a moment you thought that he made an error here?
Yeah, like only at the end I want to check something.
Okay.
Because
So
here
let's
I
spool
think
ahead
here
to the
he's just
end.
losing, but maybe at the end I made a mistake. First
Okay.
here I repeated
Yep.
because now king a6, the correct move. e5, b5. Rook f3, okay. Okay, no, this is now lost if he gives check. What happens if he plays something like, if he plays rook d5? No, rook d5, I just pushed g4 probably
You just played
immediately.
g4.
I want on rook c5. That was the thing, because he will have rook c... Is he gonna have rook c8? Okay, so now b6.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. No, like my idea was somehow to get this position. Oh no, like it's always lost.
Yeah,
okay,
it's
yeah,
always
okay.
lost.
So this position is just losing because I have this g4 trick.
Yep.
But I guess I made a mistake because I didn't take immediately on e5. I first pushed b5 or something. What did I do? Because
Well, but in this position you play g4.
no. Here just winning. But
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
can you go back for a second?
Sure.
Just go more back. When he pushed e5. And now here, what did I play? b5 I played. Yeah, that's a terrible move actually. Because b5 then he can take on f4. But my idea was after ef4 I thought I'm winning after king a7. I was thinking king, but then maybe he will just sacrifice his rook for the pawn and get with the king to the pawns. Yes. He's gonna play now rook b1 and on b6 just king d6.
Yeah.
No, wait, what?
Well, I mean, we can just make this very simple.
Yeah,
I think
of course.
just pawn takes
First,
pawn is-
take fg and now, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So here I made actually
Yeah.
a huge mistake at the end.
Yeah, because you can basically get it down to rook versus pawn and
Yes,
force
yes,
you to
yes,
give
yes.
Huh.
Because I think actually like the position, if I have f4, f5, and if I push king a6, b6, king b8, that could be a draw for black very easily. He'll just keep his rook on f8 and just play king a8, king b8. I think that is a draw. So I guess the game was full of mistakes from both sides. I think.
Well, if you
This
ever read any of these classic rook and pawn endgame books, which I'm sure you have, all these games between these great world champions, there's always mistakes back and forth on both sides. So
Yeah,
the rest of us mere mortals, the same thing.
Today I was the luckier one, I guess.
Well, you had the better position all the way
Yes.
through. It's easy to be lucky with the better position. Well, congratulations. Well
Thank you
done.
very much.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ryan Chester, and I'm the development manager for the St. Louis Chess Club. I'm here to tell everyone about a golden opportunity that we have right now. We're selling golden tickets for $50 a piece. It's a 50-50 raffle. $5,000 will go to the Scholastic Chess Initiative for the St. Louis Chess Club, and $5,000 will go to a lucky winner. We're only selling 200 of these, and we've already sold many to grandmasters and all of our commentary team as well. So if you're interested, please call the Chess Club or go to our website on the homepage and buy a golden ticket there. Thank you and good luck.
Yeah, welcome back to our live coverage here. Once again, another very exciting offer from Ryan Chester there. Be sure to check out those golden ticket raffles. As always, I'm back as Caleb Denby. It's been a while since you last saw me, so I'll reintroduce myself. Thank you to Denis Kadric and Alex Epitov for these wonderful interviews.
Great interviews, great games. I'm Patrick Wolff, and it's a pleasure to be analyzing these games with you. And there's a couple of interesting games that we can check in on before we wrap up today.
Yeah, running short on time here, so we'll look at a couple of the most really relevant games to our tournament standings and call it a day.
Yeah, let's start with the Smirin games. So. You'll remember that Akobian had a lot of pressure getting to time control. Well, he did manage to get to time control. However, whoops, sorry, going to have to click back here. He did manage to get to time control. However, his position has basically unraveled in doing so. So when last we checked in, we saw that Smirin had a very, very pleasant position. It was clear that either it was going to be a win for white or it was going to be a draw. But really, Smirin was the one playing for a win. Akobian was just trying to hang on. Roundabout here is where we left off. White just started playing very, very sensible, logical moves here. G4 opening up this king side here, creating this second weakness. Black has this weak pawn, this weak pawn. This bishop is passive, this knight is passive. So now what white is doing is opening up a second front, forcing black to make some difficult decisions.
Threats on all sides of the board.
Threats on all sides. Knight e7 actually a mistake, allowing white to bring the queen in, attack the bishop, pin the knight, brought the bishop back, the exchange of pawns. So now this f5 pawn is an additional weakness. This c5 pawn, impossible to defend. In fact, black simply didn't even try. Queen takes pawn, queen d7, knight d3, this outstandingly placed knight on d3, blocking the d pawn, defending the f pawn. A couple more moves, and what we see here is white just has a solid extra pawn and this d4 pawn probably about to drop. Computer thinks that white is literally 3 pawns up in this endgame. In other words, the advantage is overwhelming, and Smirin should win.
Should be more than enough. That c-pawn just going to walk up the board slowly but surely.
Yep.
And too many weaknesses for black. And so why don't we take a look at this game before we wrap up here. Jack Shtembuliak, of course, one of the leaders in the B group, had himself quite the technical task against Steven Zierk.
Quite the technical task indeed. As a matter of fact, it looks like he no longer really has an advantage at all. But let's go back a few moves. When last we checked into this game, we were at this point. We said, okay, white's rooks are starting to get more active, even at the cost of the pawn. And for a while, everything was sort of going according to plan. Computer likes this position, but oops, this pawn, this move, not so good. Computer actually much prefers that white move the king to c2. Just get out of the way first. Yeah. Preserve. It's not necessary to take that pawn right away.
Yeah, like we said, these last 2 pawns are very precious for white. He needs one of them in order to win this game.
But instead, after taking his pawn on f5, takes the bishop with check. And yes, it is true, white is getting the piece back. However, getting the piece back in a way that doesn't really allow him to do much with his remaining rooks. Yes, the king looks exposed, but in fact, there's no way to organize any sort of mating attack.
Not enough material left.
Not enough material left. And, well, Shtembuliak is thinking here, but it's not at all clear that he has anything better than the draw. The computer at this point thinks it's just an equal position. Quite a turn of events. Very, very effective and really valiant defense by Steven Zierk to hold what was a clearly lost position.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you viewers at home are still interested in these games, as they still seem to have some chess left to be played, you're welcome to follow along on uschesschamps.com. Unfortunately, this is about where we have to wrap up our show. So why don't we take a quick look at the results in round 5 here and see where we stand. So Ilya Smirin is hoping to convert that game against Var Akobian in the A group. Vasif Durabali, of course, lost this game to Alexander Ipatov, dropping further from where he once stood as the sole leader. Jordan van Foreest won a very nice game against Alexander Bortnyk with some fun queen sacrifices to wrap it up. Daro Swierz drew his game against Hrant Melkumian, and Alex Linderman is still playing against Ray Robson here, it seems as though they still have a fairly equal position. And over in the B group, we have Viktor Mikhalevski playing his game against Hambleton. Of course, that game with that back and forth, takes on F4 was that game that we looked at there. Still unclear what that result's going to be. Akobian drew his game against Manuel Petrosian. Zierk Perez, one of the Group B leaders, is still up against Aveta Grigorian. That game looking to be quite equal still. Still some chess left to be played there. Denis Kadric won his game against Alexander Fear. And Denis is really the third guy to look out for in this B group. If Jack and Yasser don't manage to win today, which it's looking as though they might not, Denis is going to be the next closest guy to chase them. And of course, Jack Shtembuliak is still playing against Steven Zierk in what was our key matchup of the day. And like we said, we just looked at this game. It's looking tough to win for White, very tough.
Yep.
So it's really anybody's game in the A group. Tons and tons of players, like I said, up near the top there. And in the B group, it is the story of first these two players, Jack Shtembuliak, Zierk Perez, and now it's looking as though Denis Kadric is the clear third place player to watch for.
Yep.
So Patrick, it's been wonderful having you here.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I did want to mention you're not here just for commentary, right? You're teaching a class tonight at 7 p.m.
Well, I'm giving a lecture. So over 20 years ago, I published a book called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Chess, which is basically a basic chess book. It was the last thing I did before retiring from chess as a professional and moving on to other things. The publisher came back to me last year, actually, and said we're reviving the series. Well, the book's been in print ever since. It's done pretty well, actually. Right. But they're rebranding it. So now instead of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Chess, it's Play Chess Like a Boss. Not my choice of title, but I put some time into bringing things up to date, and in particular, I really completely revamped the chapter on computers and chess. And so tonight I'm going to be giving a lecture on computers and chess with a particular focus on artificial intelligence, how AI works, and how AlphaZero employed artificial intelligence, how it works, how it's different from the other top chess engines, and a little bit of history of that.
Very interesting stuff. So if you are in the St. Louis area, be sure to join us tonight at 7 p.m. for that very special lecture. If you are a YouTube viewer, this will not be live streamed, however, it will be recorded. So keep a lookout on the YouTube channel. We will be uploading that video shortly. Other than that, what do you expect from this tournament? This is the last time we'll get to talk to you, but any clear favorites, you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there've been a number of really exciting games, and I have to say, in the B group in particular, I've been very, very impressed by Shtembuliak and by Denis Kadric. So I realize that's the B group, and you're supposed to pay more attention to the A group, but you sort of go where the chess takes you, right?
Yeah, interesting games.
Meanwhile, of course, Ray Robson is a very, very exciting chess player. It just so happens that the two games we were looking at today, not as exciting, but I'm sure that we'll have some really exciting chess coming from him and some of the others as well.
So definitely nothing determined yet. Going to have to keep an eye. So be sure to join us tomorrow. I will be back with Denis Boros talking about these games with you. We're going to be here through the end of the tournament. 3:30 p.m. as always for our start time. Be sure to join us next time for more coverage of the Fall Chess Classic.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.